Hello everybody and welcome back to the TripleJump podcast. It's a video game podcast. My name is Ben.
My name is Peter. Happy New Year!
Happy New Year to you too, Peter. How are you?
Oh, I'm okay. I'm doing alright, thank you. Had a nice little break.
Yeah.
And ready to get back to some video game chitter-chatter now.
Absolutely. And
How
we
are you?
start with some... Well, I'm good, thank you. We start with some very important video game chitter-chatter here at the beginning of 2021, don't we?
We do, yeah. It's a very special episode of the podcast today. I wonder whether it might be a shorter episode than normal, or maybe even a longer episode than normal, depending on how much we've got to say about our respective games of the year, as well as those of the listeners too, or the patrons, I should say, really.
Absolutely. First, we're going to, of course, cover our sponsor that we always cover. Then we'll decide where we're walking, which, of course, we do every week. We'll do what we're playing, so we can catch each other up on what we've been playing over the winter break, etc. And then, for the rest of the show, we'll be talking about our top 5 games of the year, including, as Peter said, those selected by the patrons. I'll talk a bit more about how the selection process went down when we get to that section, but I tried to make it as sort of transparent as possible and simple to do. And thank you to everyone who voted in it and contributed to it. We have it. We have top 5. We have 3 top 5s to get through.
We do, yeah.
It's exciting. So, Peter, who is this week's sponsor?
Hey, the winter months are well and truly here. It's literally snowing today at time of recording, is it not, Ben?
It is, Peter. That it is. It is, Peter. Is it not?
It's chilly out there. Be careful. And it can even get chilly inside your own house because it's so cold outside that it makes your house cold inside. You know, that's how science works. But you've got blankets. You got socks. You got socks for your feet, gloves for your hands, blankets for your front. But what about your back, Ben? How are you going to keep your back warm when you've got the blanket on your front? That's
What about my back?
How are you going to keep it all warm and cozy and snuggly? Well,
I don't know.
I'll tell you how. With snug backs.
Oh,
Talking about snug backs.
that's nice.
You too can have a nice snug back with the special brand new back blanket from Snugbacks.
Excellent.
Etc. You know,
Snugbacks.
Snugbacks. Talking about Snugbacks. It's just a blanket, but you lie on it instead of putting it on you. But don't tell anyone that because I think they're trying to get patent on it, and the patent office might not allow it if they learn it's just a blanket. But just keep it between yourselves. Talking about Snugbacks.
Keep it between yourselves, between your backs.
Yeah, absolutely.
So can you consume the snug back?
Absolutely not. They're for wearing only. Do not snack on a snug back. That's not what it is. It's got nothing to do with the similar sounding but very different video game bug snacks.
Or indeed bug waps.
Bug waps. Yeah, that one. So do not eat your snug backs, but put them on. Wear them.
Put them on. What's the RRP of this bad boy or girl?
999 pence.
Ooh, okay. That was a journey, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? It's funny how you can do that with just a single number and one word. Really send people on there were sort of 3 dips and dives on that roller coaster there, weren't there?
It's still, I feel like $9.99 is
still expensive.
It's still expensive to have a snug back, yeah.
Yeah,
I feel like I'd almost rather have my back not be snug and save my 999 pence.
When you're freezing your back off tonight, Ben, and you've got your £10 note sitting on your coffee table, just think about what you could have done. You could have been there with a nice snug back if you'd just forked out, you miser.
That's true. What a dingus I will have been.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to buying it. Where can I buy it?
www.snugbacks.com/bugsnacks.
Okay.
Again, still got absolutely nothing to do with that game whatsoever. They just thought they'd throw it into the URL for fun.
Snugbacks.
Yeah.
.com /bugsnacks.
Yeah, bugsnacks. It's a spoonerism of Snugbacks.
Right. Oh, this is weird. This site can't be reached. Check if there is a typo in snugbacks.com. If spelling is correct, try running Windows Network Diagnostics. What's this?
Well, I think it's either just the website is really busy and popular because everyone's trying to get their snugbacks,
Right.
or maybe you need to one Windows diagnostics.
Okay, I'll try it.
You need to run it now.
It's detecting problems. Troubleshooting has completed. Windows could not automatically detect this network's proxy settings. Is this? Are you sure that this is a legit website?
No, clearly your computer just can't detect the proxy settings of snugbacks.com. It's a shame,
Right,
but
okay.
you know, try again tomorrow, I suppose.
Oh yeah, maybe demand's just too high.
Yeah. Everyone's talking about snugbacks.
Well, I'm trying to, but they won't even let me go to their website.
Yeah. Well, don't worry about it. Just just get a normal blanket for now and just put it on your back, but don't tell Snugback.
You can't say that.
Okay.
You can't say that during the ad read for their product that specifically targets this exact issue.
I'll tell you why I can.
Why?
Because it's a lie, Ben. It's not real.
You Willem.
Oh, I got you.
How dare you? I really genuinely thought I was going to get a Snugback, but never mind.
Never mind.
We live in hope, eh? We live in hope. Well, there we go. We're not actually sponsored by Snugbacks, the bug snack not inspired back blanket. We are in fact sponsored by our wonderful patrons over at patreon.com/Team TripleJump, where if you go there and support us for as little as $1 per month, you get access to the post that we put up there asking for questions for this podcast, as well as taking part in other things like nominating and voting on the games of the year for this episode. So do consider going and supporting us. There's other tiers available too.
That's right. Do it. Do it now.
Please
well,
do.
no, wait until the end of the podcast and then do it later.
If you can multitask, but if you're driving, then don't.
Yeah, definitely not. Yeah.
Don't do it till later. Peter, where are we walking today?
We are walking through a winter wonderland.
Oh, I was thinking that. That whole time that you were umming and ahhing, I was thinking walking in a winter wonderland.
Yeah, well, I actually said walking through a winter wonderland because I was
that's
really
different.
pulling out of nowhere, and by the time I'd said winter wonderland, I realised I'd used the wrong preposition. But
yeah.
You sort of got it anyway, which is good to know.
What if we were? Oh my goodness! What if we were weeing in a winter? What if we were
never eat the yellow snow?
Walking off a winter wonderland like it's the edge of the flat Earth.
Oh my god! And then what? You just fall through space?
Yes, forever.
Oh.
Forever and ever until you meet Thor, who's zipping around with his hammer.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah, it sounds really good. James, can we make? No, we can't make that happen.
Can we animate? Can we hire Marvel in to?
That's too specific. Okay, never mind. Winter Wonderland it is. It's time, Peter, to move on to a section we've never done ever.
We've certainly never done it this early in a podcast.
No, definitely not. Although we should be halfway through question 1 by now. But anyway, let's quickly move along to what we playin'.
Oh.
It's what we playin' time. It's time to talk about what we been playing over the break. Peter, what you been playing?
Well, I intentionally didn't really want to play in too much over the break because I wanted to have a proper break and get away from anything that was too worky for me. So
understandable.
I played a little bit of Valhalla at the tail end, in the sort of first few days of the holidays, and still really enjoying that. I do think I'm probably reaching the saturation point that I reach with every Ubisoft game, and I'm getting to the point where I am now probably going to turn it off and definitely not complete the main quest and sort of come back to it later down the line. But that's not to say that I've not enjoyed it. It's just that's just how I've always played those games, really. I don't think I've ever completed an Assassin's Creed game in my life, and I've played several of them, but enjoying it. It's a great little. It's one of those where it's like I'm there more for the world, just to run around and enjoy riding a horse through history, and I've enjoyed every moment of that. It's a really good game, and I'll continue to do so. But I think getting to the point now where I might kind of put it to one side. I've got other games to play. There's all kinds of things out there. So in terms of PS5 stuff, that's probably the only thing I've played since the last podcast. However, over Christmas, one thing I did do, which didn't feel like work because it wasn't on a console, was play a lot of Jackbox Party Pack #1. I've mentioned this to you a couple of times outside of recording, but me and my high school friends, because people were all spending Christmas kind of in their own little bubbly homes, we decided to get together a few times. We did it on New Year's Eve. We played Jackbox like over the countdown and stuff, and a couple of other times as well. I had a really good time. I've played it before, but yeah, it's it's one of those games you can play again and again, because the whole point is that people are putting funny, unique answers in there and drawing silly pictures and things.
The worst answers you could possibly imagine. To
Absolutely.
Try and elicit a laugh. The most disgusting, depraved things ever.
Especially, I mean, because that's... I try and be kind of clever and witty about it if I can, like try and be relevant. And there were lots of people putting things about like current effect, there were a lot of like COVID related answers, and it was like a 2020 edition of Cards Against Humanity. It feels like
the natural evolution, doesn't it?
Yeah, but when I got really stuck at one point, it was, what was it? We were playing Quiplash, and the question was, what would be a really weird demand for someone in a hostage situation? And I had about 6 seconds left, and I was really stuck, so I just put demanding to be beheaded live on CBeebies.
Oh my goodness.
I got all the votes for that. I got like a full Quiplash for just putting something really shocking and horrible.
Incredible.
So, had a lot of fun with that game. We did a lot of Drawful as well and Fibbage, but Quiplash is one I've not really played much before, and I'm very pleasantly surprised by it. It might be one of my favourite games on the first pack. They just brought out Party Pack 7, I think, Jackbox. And,
they're really getting up there, aren't they?
I saw a review of it where they were saying this is a great Jackbox installment because it doesn't have a dud game in it that you play way less than all the others. So might be worth checking out. I don't know.
Well, let me slide in as well then and say I did exactly the same thing over New Year's with my secondary school friends.
Yeah, they were my secondary school friends too.
Just different colloquial names for the schools.
Yeah, you're right.
But yeah, I did the same thing. I also played Jackbox on New Year's, and it was really fun.
Ah, lovely.
Just such a delightful game. Did it over Discord, and everyone can tune in. It's lovely.
Yeah,
really
we did it over Zoom, but yeah, it was good. Other than that, one thing I did do over the holidays was do house admin and tidy things up and stuff in my house.
Did you gamify it?
Well, what that entailed was making sure that all 3 of the consoles I have underneath my TV are plugged into the wall, or as it happens, into a strip extender socket thing, which I bought over the holidays so that I could plug them all in.
Nice.
And also plugged into the TV. So that would be my PS5 and my PS4, but also a PS2 that's been sitting there since I moved in, and has been, I think, plugged into the wall, it was plugged into the TV but not into the wall because I didn't have enough sockets. Mm-hmm. So when I did that, I did actually sit down and play loads and loads of Soul Calibur 2 and Tekken Tag, because again, that didn't feel like work. So I probably played about 3 hours of Tekken Tag in the past week, which
Nice.
I didn't think I would do because, fighting games, once you've played through arcade mode once or twice, you've kind of done it all, especially when you've already 100%ed that game once upon a time and you know who all the characters are that you're going to unlock and you know what all their endings are. Then, what else is there? But I couldn't really stop. And so I've had a bit of a PS2 session over the past fortnight instead of, more current gen stuff. But I'm back into that now. We played, at time of recording, Sackboy yesterday on our stream, didn't we? And
yeah,
looking forward to playing that on my own time as well.
Yeah, it's good.
What about you then? Apart from Jackbox, what have you been playing?
Jackbox. Well, let's continue talking about Sackboy briefly. I have finished Sackboy now.
Mm-hmm.
I have all of the trophies except one. And I realised that as I said to you yesterday when we were streaming it, my exhaustive approach to how I was playing through the game, which was really tiring and honestly a bit experience ruining, in that I felt like I had to 100% complete each level as I went. So
Yeah.
do it without dying, collect all the gifts, and get the highest score, and also get all of the sort of the balls of energy that are hidden throughout the level as well. Mm-hmm. And so it would often result in me, especially on the later levels, having to play them multiple times in a row just to try and get these specific goals. And the only reason I did that is because in my head, without looking at the trophies, because I was intending to go for the platinum, the previous Little Big Planet games were you had to ace every level, do them all without dying. So naturally, I assumed there would be trophies or rewards for doing the same thing here with all the levels. There are not at all. Yeah. And when I got towards the end of the game and I checked the trophies, I was relieved and a little bit cross. So thankfully, I was able to play through the rest of it without doing that. But the final trophy that you have to do is so brutal and punishing that I have sort of semi-permanently shelved the game.
Oh no.
Or at least my attempt to get the trophy. Because you know that time trial we did that you unlock as you go through?
Yeah.
And there was one, you just sort of have to go from one end to the other as fast as possible. There are 15 in total in the game. Mm-hmm. And the last one you have to do for a trophy is all of them linked together. And it takes, to get a gold, you have to do it in 10 minutes. So that's 10 minutes of perfect platforming without dying or getting hit by any obstacles as it gets harder and harder.
In a single run.
In a single run. If you die, you go back to the start. And rightfully, a lot of people online have been saying, why is this so ridiculously hard? It's nothing like the rest of the game. What is going on here? There was an exploit that has since been patched where you could... And this worked for all the time trials. You could get to the end of them and set any time. So you could just take your time and be really careful, basically. And as soon as you got to the end, you would press circle to do a roll towards the finish line, pause it just before you crossed the finish line, and then click replay. And when the menu faded down to restart the mission, you would roll over the finish line anyway, and it would finish the level, but it would give you a time of 0 seconds. So you would get a guaranteed gold. That's been patched. So the people who have done it legitimately, I take my hat off to you, but I do not have the patience to become that good at the game. So I'm kind of sad that I'm being sort of gatekept from the platinum by this one trophy that's holding me hostage. But never mind. It's a really delightful game, and we are streaming it every Thursday. So do come along and give it a watch.
Absolutely.
I've also played only a couple of games of Warzone.
Yeah.
And at the moment, it's sadly a bit unplayable. I don't have the specifics here, but there is a completely overpowered game-breaking gun that's been brought in as part of the update that introduced various elements of Black Ops. So it's a lot of the Black Ops weapons are now in there. And one of them in particular is a favorite of a lot of players. And again, I don't know the specifics, but my friend was telling me at least that it's essentially a sniper rifle that fires assault rifle ammo. And it's completely broken. And we dropped in, I think, 3 times in a row and all ended up dying within 5 minutes to this gun in each game. So it's I don't know what they're doing, but hopefully they fix that and I'll go back in at some point. But yeah, that's ruined it.
It's a shame.
Yeah, moving on, talking about Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War specifically, which I did get over Christmas. I played the story of that. I enjoyed it. It plays with that whole sort of double agent, brainwashing, spy stuff that I thought was so compelling about the first Black Ops on PS3 and Xbox 360 in 2010, 2011, something like that. Really, really enjoyed the story. Obviously, it's a beautiful game anyway. And it actually plays with a few different things that Call of Duty's never done before. It gives you the choice of optional side missions, but in order to do them properly, you need to pick up the intel in other missions, and then you need to solve a puzzle to work out what to do. So you have to listen to audio record. I had to look up a guide, honestly, but you have to listen to audio recordings and make notes and then compare them to the other evidence you found, and because it's different for everyone, it's a randomly generated answer to unlock a computer and stuff. It's interesting. I like it. I like what they did there. There's also a level where you have to, you're not just running from A to B. It's sort of more of an open environment where you can go around and do optional objectives and stuff, and you're sort of infiltrating a place. It's really cool. I liked it. I liked it a lot. I thought it was good stuff. And Additionally, I played a lot of zombies, and I've really been enjoying that. I told you yesterday I played until 2 a.m. because it glitched and wouldn't let us exfil, which is a new thing it lets you do in zombies now. You can call a chopper and escape after a certain amount of time, but it broke and it wouldn't let us do it. So we just kept going and going and going, and then it was 2 a.m. and I was very tired. But it's really fun. Really enjoy zombies. To rattle through the last couple, Spider-Man Remastered. What a ridiculously beautiful game that is.
Yeah.
Still. And the load times are ridiculous. It takes about 2 seconds to get to the main menu and a further 2 to get into the game. It's so insane. And I know this was one of the things that they showed off early in the PS5's sort of announcement about how fast the console is. But yeah, it's ridiculous. Still really enjoy that game. I played through the whole thing, and I'm just to sort of get myself ready for Miles Morales, which I'm going to start this weekend, finally. Yeah. But it has 60 frames per second ray tracing. And it's just something else to see sort of real-time reflections of Spider-Man swinging past a building, while also seeing the whole of the city reflected as well. It's incredible. It's really impressive. And finally, I played WWE 2K20 last night in advance of today's stream, and it's still absolutely not great. I did one match to get myself reacquainted with the controls, and it was Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Eddie Guerrero. A great match, I'm sure you'll all agree.
Yeah.
Stone Cold Steve Austin made his entrance. On his title card that came up that says his name, it had Stone Cold on one line and Steve Austin on the line underneath, but it overlaid the two lines, so they were on top of each other. So it was Steve Austin, and Eddie Guerrero's car that he makes his entrance in just drove right through the stage. At the top of the ramp, he drove it into the stage, got out of it, and as it zoomed out, it showed quite clearly that the car was half in the stage. Anyway. So it's still good. It's still really, really good. But that's what I've been playing.
Wow. Look at us. Hey.
Look
at us. 2021.
Look at us.
Who'd have thought?
Not me.
Certainly not me. Well, without further, which one should we say? Should we say adieu this time, or
yeah?
Let's adieu,
but do the emphasis wrong. So.
Okay, yeah.
Adieu.
Without further ado, maybe we should move on to Game of the Year. That's what we're here for.
I suppose we should. It's Game of the Year time, Peter.
It certainly is. Wow, it feels a bit weird to be doing a podcast, but to have a completely different segment to what we normally do. But here we are, we're doing it.
Here we are. I can't remember what our running order was like for last year's Game of the Year show. In fact, I could just look at it. I've got the file still, but here we are. Anyway, it's Game of the Year time. We're going to talk about our top 5 games of the year, as well as the Patreon voted Game of the Year for 2020. How this worked briefly was basically I put up a post asking for people to submit their 3 favourite games of last year. I went through it and made a note about which games were mentioned the most. The top 10 games that were mentioned were then put into a poll, and then people had one vote to vote for their favourite. And here we are with the top 5 of that.
Yeah, very exciting.
Are you ready?
I am, yeah.
Do you want to kick us off with the listener-voted number 5?
Yes, the listener-voted number 5 was actually a tie, would you believe? Wow.
I don't believe it.
Well, it's true, let me tell you. A tie between Hades and, somewhat surprisingly, I think, Cyberpunk 2077. Now, of course, lots of people were very excited for Cyberpunk 2077, and lots of people are still very much defending it and saying, hey, it's a real shame what's happening. But, I've had great experiences with this game, and, it's good for me. I had a great time. So I guess that's partly why it's here, despite some of the controversy about its release.
Entirely possible. We've discussed before. It's clear that there's a good game in there, but it's just the state it was released, especially on consoles, is unacceptable. But having seen the data, Peter, between the amount of times it was mentioned initially in people's 3 favourite games versus the amount of votes it ended up getting in the poll, I do wonder if maybe some shenanigans were going on, perhaps, with people who were either protest voting or maybe they just genuinely didn't get a chance to be involved in the first round, and then they voted anyway. Either way, though, Hades also a very, very welcome number 5 game of the year. I've heard incredible things about Hades.
Yeah,
and I'm really excited to play it. I'm not a fan of roguelikes, but that's exactly what I've heard a lot of people who've since fallen in love with it say as well. So I find that quite promising. I know it's on Switch, but I'm gonna wait to see if it comes or when it comes to PS4 or PS5. And if it doesn't, I'll hop in on the handheld. But yeah, it sounds brilliant, and I'm really glad it's getting some recognition here.
Yeah, it's interesting that the number 5 spot on here is tied from games that neither of us have played. But we'll get to some others very shortly. We've got some thoughts from people who are these people who nominated the game initially.
Yes, so these all the thoughts we've got noted down here are from the first round of nominations. Unfortunately, we only heard from one person sort of vaguely talking about Hades, and the other times it was nominated, nobody talked it up. So we've got one thought about Hades and 3 thoughts about Cyberpunk.
Yeah. To start with Hades, then I suppose Redweth, who was actually referring to all nominations, but sort of collectively said these were probably the only games that allowed me to put everything else out of my mind and focus on finding the fun in single player experiences. The gameplay in Hades is a joy. Oh, there you go.
Sounds delightful.
Glowing review there.
Absolutely. I'll hop over to our very own James Jenkins, who I just sort of poked and asked him to fill out the rest of... Basically, we didn't get many people talking about Cyberpunk or Hades, so their nomination presented a bit of a challenge in that we didn't have many listener thoughts, so I got James to write something as well. Of course, James has spoken about Cyberpunk extensively here.
And at least, we've got someone from TripleJump who has played this and can give some sort of response. Yeah.
Absolutely. He says, for the record, it wouldn't be my top pick for Game of the Year, but despite the flaws, it still delivers a fantastic story with brilliantly well-rounded characters, great gameplay that varies depending on your build, a ridiculously cool setting, and superb soundtrack. Its ambition was its downfall, but when things click, it's phenomenal.
Man, we should hire that guy as a writer.
He's really good at writing, isn't
he? Yeah. Okay, that's good to know. I just feel like I was really looking forward to that game, and then I didn't get it initially, partly just because of budget. I'd bought a bunch of PS5 games already and had plenty to play. Even finances aside, I had enough to go at. And then by the time I'd waited around for the moment where I might have considered buying it, I was like, oh, what's all this that I'm seeing on social media? So I will play it at some point, and I hope that I'll have a really good time with it. But
me too.
Only time will tell.
Apparently there are rumours that we're looking at sort of June-ish time for the big patches to have come out by.
Right.
That's like based on Reddit insiders or whatever. People saying that they're aiming for a No Man's Sky style reversal of fates. So we will see. I can definitely wait for that.
Yeah. Should we do one of our own number 5s now?
Well, we've also got to hear from the Gazorpatron and Ben Hambrook as well about their thoughts about
Cyberpunk. James at the bottom of the list, and because we'd reached the bottom, I was like, well, there we go.
That's
We're
it.
done.
That's the end.
We've
that's
definitely
the end
read those other 2.
The Gazorpatron.
Gazorpatron.
Of Cyberpunk. Sure, it's buggy, but in every other aspect, it's amazing.
Okay, that's good. Get past the bugs and then you'll enjoy it. And Ben Hambrook said, I know how busted the console versions are at time of writing. On PC, there are a couple of visual flares, but the overall experience and story, world, and gameplay are something you can get lost in easily, and I look forward to keep playing it. So maybe that's the way to play. Just play it on PC instead.
Yeah, it sounds like the most stable version for sure.
Yeah. So there we go. At least the audience have had a good time with it, and I'm sure we will eventually.
Yes, I'm looking forward to playing it when it's a bit more stable.
Yeah,
hopefully.
too.
We will see. Peter, what's your number 5?
My number 5 is, to quote myself, I've just realised, it's a bit of a wild card entry.
Okay.
In the, that's it. My number 5 is Dreams.
Ooh.
So it's it's not its own game in the sense of probably every other game we're going to talk about today. It's not got a story. It's not got a protagonist. Well, it's got those floaty things that I've forgotten the name of, but it's not got a proper lead character and so on. However, I think it's just such a marvelous tool, and I've had so much fun just playing other people's creations. I've still never even bothered trying to make anything in it. I've not even opened up the creation suite within the game, and maybe one day I will, but for now it's still just always there whenever you want to play it's just a real revels bag of games, isn't it? You never know what you're going to get, and some of the stuff that's been made in Dreams I think is unbelievable. I've seen remakes of games, like there's a Mario 64 one, there's a PT one that are really well done. There are like fan sequels and fan made entries in established series, but there's plenty of unique stuff as well. Also, I guess you've probably seen some of this stuff, like people just make 3D art and stuff. I saw one online where someone had just made a full English breakfast on a plate.
Delicious Dreams breakfast, it was amazing.
It's just all shiny and perfect. You can change
all the lighting and stuff on it as well.
Yeah, and all you do is just look at the breakfast, but it's just really well done. And then, of course, people aren't making just games or kind of static art like that. They're doing proper animations in it too, like they're doing their own little films and things. So I stuck at number 5 because I think it's in a sense it's in a completely separate league. It's not really got the same yardsticks by which to measure it against other things, but I considered not including it at all and just giving it an honorable mention, but I thought no, it is that good, and I was that impressed by it that why shouldn't it be in the top 5? Just because it's a different game, that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be compared or shouldn't be in the running for this. So I couldn't not include Dreams.
Amazing.
I think a very, very powerful tool.
It is,
and especially nowadays in the world we live in, where it's so easy to share thoughts and creations. So brilliant stuff.
Yeah, it is amazing, and of course it's also home to The Quest for Cheese.
Of course it is, yeah.
And also Cecil Prump's Sheep game.
Yes.
Which you should definitely look up if you haven't played it. It's amazing. Top tier stuff. Rory Keeson actually nominated Dreams and said, Dreams for highlighting some true creativity on PS4 plus some great memes.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole other side of it as well, isn't it? There's some really, really good stuff happening on the meme front.
Some very overwhelming loud noises.
Stuff.
Very weird.
Yeah.
Very weird. My number 5, Peter, is Call of Duty Warzone.
Okay, yeah, you spent a lot of time in that game this year, haven't you?
I did, and I think by virtue of the amount of time spent in it alone, it gets a nomination from me. Is it, the best game I played this year, or even the 5th best game I played this year? Arguably not, by traditional sort of metrics, but I still spent a lot of time in it, and it brought me and my friends together in a weird, shooty, violent way, like Animal Crossing did for other people. You know how everyone went to each other's islands and stuff?
Yeah.
And they're talking about how Animal Crossing, I mean, we are going to get to that, believe me.
We are.
How a lot of people talk about how Animal Crossing sort of kept them sane, especially during the first lockdown last year. I'm not saying Call of Duty Warzone kept me sane, because I was fortunate enough to not have to, or at least not to struggle in the way that a lot of people did with the first lockdown, and even now, as we go into lockdown 3. But Warzone reconnected me with a group of friends that I would maybe talk to a couple of times a year, if that, and we'd maybe grab a drink at Christmas, and that would be it.
Yeah.
And now we're playing games with each other, and they've all got Cold War now as well, so we've been playing Zombies this last week. But it's allowed us to reconnect and play games with each other at least once a week, and it's been so nice, not only to reconnect with these old friends, but to have like a multiplayer game that just continues to evolve and adapt and grow. And I know you and I have spoken at length about how those kinds of games with the battle passes and the sort of live service elements is just not what we want. But when it comes to Warzone, I know I've now bought Black Ops because of it, so maybe it was an effective marketing tool. But when it comes to Warzone, as it's free to play, I don't mind ignoring a lot of that stuff. You know, all the things that pop up all the time, like buy the new operator pack, and it's like, actually, I don't think I will. And it's been really good fun, and it's just been like, you know, I'm playing through Spider-Man, or I've just finished Spider-Man, but then I'll get a message saying, hey, anyone want to do some zombies or whatever? And I know that's not Warzone, but similar sphere, and it's just sort of like, yeah, actually, I will hop onto this multiplayer game where there's not really any progression, or I don't really feel like I'm accomplishing something. It's just about spending time with people. And it's nice. It's really nice. It's violent, and it's not perfect, but I've had so many good times with Call of Duty Warzone over the last year that it's my number 5.
Lovely. Do you know if anyone else nominated that in the...
They did. A couple of people did. Yeah, I think it made it onto the final poll, actually.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't know if anyone said anything about it. Warzone specifically, as it was free, says Stukalicious. Richard Major nominated it. No. I went with a couple of games that deserve some love here over the money machine that is Warzone. That's Callum. A few people mentioned it. Warzone is a very well-rounded battle royale experience. Ben Hambrook. So there we go. That's what people had to say about it. But it did make it through to the second round. So a lot of people did enjoy it this year. So that was nice. Nice to see.
Well, it's time to move on to number 4.
Yeah, I suppose it is.
Would you like to reveal this time number 4 from the patrons?
One hop this time. The number 4 game of the year, as voted by the patrons, is Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Ooh, yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if this is somewhere on your list, but I might be surprised.
You would not be surprised.
Okay.
So I won't go into too much detail about this other than to say that yes, it deserves to be mentioned here at least twice in this episode.
And you will get to it.
I will get to it. Absolutely.
So Rory Keeson says, it manages to improve on the original and fleshes out characters in great ways whilst making combat fun and different. And Lim89 says, could never get into the PS1 game. I was very much into 9 personally, but this one made me care about the characters and world, something the original didn't do, so I call that a win. And I think those two quotes for me kind of sum up the appeal of the game for me from as someone who didn't play the original and has looked at it and known that it's it's a much beloved game from a console that is maybe my favorite console of all time, and I've still not played it. I often look at the original Final Fantasy VII and think I just can't get beyond that now. Like if I played it at the time, I'm sure I would have loved it. It's not aged very very well, visually speaking, at least. But
oh no.
That's what makes it a prime candidate for a remake. Of course, there's a big remake and remaster trend at the moment. It's been going on for years at this point. But why not make a game? Why not remake a game that is so highly acclaimed and much beloved, but no longer stands up from a visual standpoint? That's exactly the kind of game you should be remaking, and to bring it up to date as well by altering the combat so it's not really truly turn-based anymore, but it's got like a sort of slowdown to it, hasn't it? So it's almost like you can almost imagine it being turn-based because you've got enough time to make those kinds of decisions tactically. So I still haven't played the remake, but again, because there's been lots to play for me. There always seems to be, because I'm always behind. But it is great to know it's there for when I do finally think I should play Final Fantasy VII at long last, and now I can play it in beautiful, crisp HD or 4K.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll wait until more of it has come out. I know that's a long way away, probably, but
absolutely. I think that's part of the problem, unfortunately. And speaking of which, let's get some let's get some perhaps a slightly different perspective other than the gushing that I've put into the document there from Francesca, who said, as a Final Fantasy fan, an honourable mention is the Final Fantasy VII Remake. As good as it was, I wasn't too impressed with the pacing of the story, nor the fact that it is 1/3 of a game for £60.
Yeah.
I understand it's a huge game, but as bloated as Red Dead Redemption 2 is, they were able to release that as a whole. The soundtrack is phenomenal, but that is a given from Square Enix. Which is fair enough. That is fair enough. It is 1/3 of the game, and God knows when we're going to get the next one. And they really did have to pad out the first part. I will talk in due course about why I think they did such a good job with that, but I do understand definitely that viewpoint.
When you mention, or when Francesca mentions the likes of Red Dead in comparison to what is 1/3 of a game, it just kind of make you think, man, and they were working on it for a long time as well.
Yes.
So how come Red Dead 2 can come out like that? So full and packed in. I know, obviously, they crunched like hell, and it was very controversial at the time. But
and
how can that
Fantasy
come out?
Changed hands as well. They completely scrapped what a studio had made.
That's true,
and started again. So I think it was just sort of an identity crisis, really. I mean, the Final Fantasy games have had such a rough go of it, the last few ones, in terms of a straightforward development cycle. So we'll see if that changes with 16 and 7 Part 2, but who knows? Yeah.
Got a couple of other thoughts here. James says Final Fantasy VII leads the way personally because of the pure escapism. Sorry, I thought there was a full stop there. The pure escapism it offered me as a game, I adore from when I was a kid. I completed it twice. Platted, it says in brackets. Well done, James. Nice. And Ian Rogers simply says, an updated classic.
Oh, it is. It definitely is.
And we'll hear your thoughts later, I'm sure.
We will. We'll get to them.
Well, it's time for my number 4.
Ooh.
This goes out to my best friend, Spider-Man Miles Morales.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, again, we're talking about a game that is like Final Fantasy VII Remake. It's not a huge experience. It's certainly not it's not comparable to the original Marvel Spider-Man game, but it is its own release, and therefore I think it can, of course, be nominated as a game in Game of the Year. And I really, really enjoyed that. It was, I think, the first game I played on my PS5, so that probably helped because, I think any of your, or what am I trying to say, any person's first game on their new console is probably going to have a little extra, sense of, wow, here I am playing this. But I thoroughly enjoyed almost every aspect to it. I think the only thing I didn't like that much is I found Miles a little bit annoying, which is, kind of an issue when it's called Spider-Man Miles Morales.
Was he Cal Kestis annoying, or was he...
He wasn't quite Cal Kestis annoying. He was, I think he was a bit unbelievably nice, and, he just wants to help everyone and do the right thing all the time. But you could say the same about Peter Parker, so that alone isn't enough to kind of say... I don't like that, but I kind of didn't find him. He didn't seem like a real human being in that sense. But I also just don't really like his voice that much. I think he's got a slightly irritating voice. I don't know. I didn't really like listening to him. However, that's probably the only major problem I had with the game. Of course, you're still in New York, but I mean, you have to be. It's Spider-Man. So what they did was they turned everything snowy and wintry so that you at least feel like you're in a new environment and you're not playing through the exact same world as you were in the original, or the main game, I should probably say. But I thought that alone was actually quite nice, just to explore New York in a different season. And there's like sort of Christmas lights around in places, and it definitely has a different feel to it. I thought the climax was fantastic. I won't obviously say too much because you're yet to play it yourself.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things I actually enjoyed the most was the fact that I went into this not really knowing anything about Miles and his whole Spider-Man storyline and his rogues gallery, and I didn't know anything about any of those characters. So it's probably the first time in a way that I was able to sit down and play a Spider-Man video game and almost not know who was who and what was going to happen. And so, for example, in Marvel Spider-Man, when Peter goes to work and he's like, "Hey Doc," you're like, "Okay, well, I know what's going to happen here before the end of the game. There's probably going to be some sort of heel turn." Whereas with Miles Morales, I didn't know who any of these people were. I didn't know people's secret identities versus their real identities. So it kind of kept me guessing, and it kept me engaged in that respect, in a way that, in fact, no other Spider-Man game ever has been able to do, because I've just gone in knowing about these characters. The swinging is as good as ever. The combat's as good as ever. In fact, the combat, I think, was even better than the Marvel Spider-Man. You've got the new Venom punches and things, and I couldn't put it down really. I played it late into the night. Over a series of just a few days, really. I think I got it finished in, and I'm looking forward to going back and playing it again at some point. I've not gone around and done all the collectibles and things, but I had a great time getting to the end of the story. And as I say, I thought the climax was really good too. The last sort of chapter or so really got me engaged.
Awesome.
So
I'm really looking forward to playing it, especially playing through remastered, which I know you did as well. Well, not remastered, but on PS4 anyway. And
I played it just beforehand. Yeah,
it's like it's getting me excited. You know, I'm ready to go, ready and raring to go. Tomorrow, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to start Miller's Morales.
Yes, do it. I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm sure I will.
What's your number 4, Ben?
My number 4 is Ghost of Tsushima.
Okay.
Now, this was a genuine surprise to me this year. I was not expecting much from this game for many reasons. One of them was that we didn't really know a lot about it.
Yeah.
In that they did a state of play about, maybe a month or two before it came out? And it was basically, here's the world, you can follow foxes, and the wind will blow in the direction of objectives.
Yeah.
And it was like, that's great, but like, why am I here? Yeah, but we've got the famous director mode where you can make everything black and white, and it's like, that's awesome, but like, who is this guy and why am I here? Like, no, I don't think you understand. You can cut bamboo. Oh, that's great, but who am I? What am I doing here? And before that, of course, it was just the sort of vague E3 trailers of a sword fight with Cherry Blossom.
Yeah,
so that's all we sort of knew. And so my hopes weren't massively high, despite the fact that obviously everyone knew, God, it's a beautiful game at the very least. And then The Last of Us 2 got delayed again and again, and they were releasing a month apart. And I think myself and a lot of other people thought at that time, well, why don't they just push Ghost of Tsushima as well? We don't know when the PS5 is coming out, but that might be why they're not pushing it, because they don't want it too close to the next console launch. But surely having such big games 1 month apart is only going to hurt the second one, right?
Yeah.
And then it really didn't hurt it at all. And I don't know if it was just because after the sort of chaos that ensued in the wake of The Last of Us Part 2 coming out on the internet, that this was sort of a unifying game for a lot of people, where it was like, we can all stand here, both terrible people and nice people, and say the Ghost of Tsushima is a good game and we enjoy it. But it was really, really good. Genuinely, I enjoyed it so much, and I got so much playtime out of it as well. Obviously, I ended up platinuming it and talked about it extensively on this podcast, but it was just a gorgeous game. I found the story to be way more compelling than I was expecting. I really enjoyed that. And for me, because I haven't played like a proper open world game like that for a long time, because it's very Ubisoft-esque in a lot of its design choices. But it does them in unique and interesting ways. The game is always funneling you towards something, and the map is never covered in a million map markers as well, which is so refreshing. So, I've spoken about how much I dislike Ubisoft open world games, and I did get Assassin's Creed Valhalla for Christmas, so I will try it at some point, and I'm genuinely looking forward to giving it a go. But based on what you've said and what other people have said, I don't hold out much hope of actually perhaps getting through the whole thing. But I will give it a try. And it just felt like this was sort of an Assassin's Creed game if it were done really, really well. And we've got some listener thoughts here as well, and I want to echo what someone says in a second, or will say in a second, which is that I feel like the critics didn't really give this game the time of day, and that kind of makes me a bit sad, because while it didn't review poorly, I think the public reaction to this game was significantly warmer than the critical reception, and it's had a patch so it runs way better on PS5. The loading times were already obscenely fast on PS4, so much so that I think they had to extend them a bit just so people had enough time to read the the menu, the loading screen prompts and stuff. No one had enough time to read them. But yeah, really, really good game. Really enjoyed it, and I have no doubt that we'll get a second Ghost of Tsushima game, and fingers crossed it will be just as good. But I loved it. It was really, really good.
Yeah. I was pleased that it was so well received, and it is a beautiful game. Like, you know, from what I've seen of it, it's just every single photo mode screenshot I have seen is just stunning in every way. Yeah,
it's really good game.
Well, we're moving on to number 3 now.
Yeah.
So the third game of the year, as voted for by our patrons, is, yes, it's time, Animal Crossing: New Horizons.
Hooray!
Hooray!
What a lovely game.
It saved a lot of people during lockdown from feeling sad and lonely and not being able to kind of stay in touch with people.
Yeah.
As I'm sure we're about to hear in some of the responses, such as Ross Bramble, who said, saved us all during lockdown. It's any other Animal Crossing game with less stuff in it, so they can pad out DLC updates for 2 years, but 2020 would have been a lot harder without it. And Will Howe says, even if Tom Nook is off the Christmas card list this year for his capitalistic ways, it was just what was needed in this hellhole of a year. Yeah, it's true. It's definitely the thing that I think everyone thinks of immediately when they think of Animal Crossing New Horizons, and oh yeah, that came out in 2020. Oh yeah, thank God it did. You know, it came out just at the right time. And it was around the time as well that we were hearing from a lot of studios and publishers that, oh, our game has been delayed, or this thing that, you know, we were going to bring out in the spring is now coming out in the winter or whatever. And I think that was kind of the first game to release amidst the point where the world looked like it was definitely going to change, for at least for the time being. It was like, hey, here's a new game. Don't worry, we got you. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. It honestly it failed to hold my attention. Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've never played an Animal Crossing game before. I understand the appeal, and I am so glad it's what a lot of people needed this year. And it's definitely my thoughts on the game aren't, you know, say someone really enjoying Death Stranding and me thinking, what is wrong with you? It's more a case of, I'm really glad you like it. It's not really for me, but it's such a lovely, delightful game. Once I'd finished sort of creating my island as I desired, I sort of lost interest in it.
Yeah.
And, you know, none of the updates since have brought me back, but it was genuinely really lovely to see the internet so involved in that game, especially initially. I know a lot of people are still playing it, obviously. But yeah, just a real game changer in 2020. Just one of those games that just comes along at just the right time. And obviously the whole crossover with Doom and stuff was delightful when that was happening. And yeah, just a lovely game. Just really lovely. No violence in there at all.
I feel the same in that it's also not for me, but I could very much appreciate what people were getting out of it. And you know, I'm friends with people on Twitter who are just my girlfriend's friends, and now I've kind of added them and stuff, and they're all really into it. And when I see them like posting pictures of their islands and just talking about like, oh, Tom Nook did this today, and you know, that they've got their own little community going together, and it is really nice to see. It was especially nice to see when the game first came out, and we all needed a bit of light, and that's where some people got their light from playing that game.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be streaming and people would be asking, I don't know if you got the same thing, but people would be asking if they could post their island code because they had a particularly good price for turnips.
Mm-hmm.
That whole economic study was quite interesting to watch unfold as well. I think Nintendo just absolutely smashed it with that one. And it sold obscenely well. Really, really well. So there you go. I'm sure we will continue to get Animal Crossing content for years to come.
We will, I'm sure. We've got a couple more thoughts. I don't know if you want to read those ones out.
Sure. Kathleen Collier says, this game got me through this year and all the challenges it has had. It's been a literal lifesaver at one point when my mental health was at the worst. And Connor Mountford says, got to throw in Animal Crossing purely because it helped keep me sane over the first lockdown.
Everyone, it's a unanimous,
yes,
it's kind of a unanimous thoughts, really. Everyone's saying the same thing, and fair enough, rightly so, I suppose.
Absolutely. We've tried to limit it to four thoughts per listener game, but a lot of people said exactly the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Just a very important game that came along at the right time. Well done, Animal Crossing.
Well done, Animal Crossing. There's another game I want to say well done to, Ben. It's number 3. Yeah. This one might surprise some people. I think others won't be surprised because I was kind of saying at the time as I was playing it, I think this is going to be one of my games of the year. It's Astro's Playroom, everybody.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So this is actually, yet again, I've realised, another small gaming experience. But hey, I'm Tiny Peter. I have to take things in small bites. Don't worry. My last two games are big, proper, full-size games, so we will get to those. But I hesitated as to whether to truly include this yet again, but I had such fun with this game, and I think that at least within its own, in terms of what it set out to do, I think within those metrics, it's essentially a perfect game. Right. I'm not saying it's actually an objectively 100% best game ever in the entire gaming sphere, but you can imagine them in a sort of creative meeting, setting out some objectives. What are we trying to achieve here? Writing some stuff on a board, ticking them off as through the development process. And I really think they did everything they were trying to do and did it exceptionally well. Aside from it being charming and pretty and adorable in the same way that Sackboy it is proving to be, having played it for a couple of hours with you yesterday on stream. You have to talk about the PlayStation references and the fact that it was a celebration of everything that PlayStation has done over the past goodness knows how many years, over 20 years, 25 years, something like that.
Yeah, 94, 93, something like that.
Yeah. So there were, of course, all the little kind of reenactments of scenes going on as you explored the world, and I really liked actually how they peppered them through in a mixed way. So there were different worlds to explore in that game, themed essentially around different consoles, in that the relics that you would collect along the way would all be peripherals and bits of hardware associated with a certain generation of PlayStation consoles. So one world would have all PS1, like multi-tap and controller and so on, and then the final screen you would go and find a big PS1. But they didn't just put PS1 games all the way throughout that world being reenacted by the little bots. They kept it varied, and I thought that was good actually, because when I got to the PS3 world, I probably would have been a little bit, to a certain extent, a little bit like baffled by all the stuff if it had all been PS3 games. Now, admittedly, I've played some of them that eventually came out on PS4 or have been remastered or whatever. But I thought that was just a nice little touch to keep it to have some appeal in there for people who maybe have missed one of the consoles, like me, because I had a 360. But I think even putting aside all that though, and the amazing boss, which is like quite a deep cut into the the PlayStation history, spoilers, having that boss. I'll keep it spoiler free for people who haven't experienced that, but it was a great boss fight. But yeah, putting aside all the PlayStation references, I actually think it just plays really well as a platformer. I think that's, as much as anything else, what I enjoyed about it. You know, I'm a big fan of 3D platformers and mascot style, colourful, cartoony things, and I really liked all the sort of tugging mechanics.
Of course
and,
you did, you filthy
of course,
man.
I loved it. Excellent stuff. And when you sort of get zipped up into those different suits and they give you different abilities, and I think overall, more than anything else that I took away from it, I love the new controller. I love the DualSense controller and the way that game showed it off. Now, of course, in a sense, that's more of a controller of the year applause to Sony in general, rather than, you know, it's not Astro didn't design the controller, right? But
you don't know that.
Well, I don't know that. He lives inside your PS5. Maybe he did. But to sit and play through a game that utilized it in such an incredible way, it almost, I think I said this at the time when I talked about it on the podcast, that it was almost kind of not augmented reality, but it just added a little extra dimension. You know, it was like I wasn't playing a game sitting on my sofa watching a 2D image of it on my screen, and yeah, I wasn't quite playing it in 3D with a VR headset on, but I was almost somewhere in between, because you can feel the springs in your hand as you squeeze down on your triggers, and you could hear the sound of the rain almost landing on your head, even though it's just playing out of a speaker on your controller. And I just, there was something about that controller and how it really added something to the gameplay experience that meant that I couldn't not include Astro. And actually, I had more fun with that game than I did with Miles Morales, which was a lot to start with. So Astro is my number 3.
Well, I'm really glad to hear that. A lot of people had nice things to say about Astro as well, and I'll read those shortly. But yeah, the fact it was free as well, I think is such a tick in its favour. And that PS3 zone that maybe didn't quite hit home the way the other ones did for you, that was my jam. I loved it. Loved going through and seeing all the weird PS3 peripherals. The blooming the relics was so good, but the bloody PSP accessories as well, with the GPS tracker and the camera. I was like, I remember that. It's amazing. We've talked about it obviously at length before, but I'll say it again, that it's just nice to finally, for PlayStation to be at a point where they can look back at everything they've done with reverence, even the wonky stuff, and they kind of know that it's a bit wonky, but people still remember it, you know, and it's important to a lot of people, whereas up until now it's sort of been, I mean, I can't really point to an example outside of Astro where they've behaved like this. Everywhere else, and before Astro, it was sort of a case of, we're the big boy market leader. We've got to be very serious about our games. Come and play our very serious games for adults. Don't talk about Crash Bandicoot. Who's that? Ellie's going to stab someone in the neck now. We're the serious place for but being able to sort of look at yourself, even though Astro doesn't take the piss out of itself, it does look back with mirth and sort of pokes fun at various points. And I think it's so nice to see that. And I know, you know, it's a $1 billion faceless corporation or whatever and stuff, but it doesn't mean that they haven't created memories over the years that a lot of us are nostalgic for. And it was so nice to see that, you know, represented in Astro's Playroom.
I think that's what made me enjoy that final boss fight even more, is that when I played the Reignited trilogy, I was worried that when they advertised the Reignited trilogy, they really heavily focused on the Spyro 1 stuff, and I was like, oh man, that's really good to see. I was worried that being the oldest game, and maybe the game that the fewest number of people at Toys for Bob might have played, that they would kind of lean more into Spyro 2 and 3, the slightly more contemporary of the three, and just sort of quickly get through Spyro 1 sort of thing. And I kind of felt the same thing with Astro's Playroom, in that I was worried that they'd really kind of just show off PS4 and PS3 stuff more than the rest. And then for that final boss to be that final boss, I was shaking my head, I think, and just I was gobsmacked. I was like, what a strange thing to choose, and what a brilliant thing to choose.
Yeah.
I just didn't see it coming at all. So yeah, to have that true celebration of, as you say, every aspect, and you know, the full tenure and even the wonky stuff and even the really old archaic stuff that maybe doesn't that looks a bit weird today. It was really nice.
Yeah, it was. Francesca said, Astro's Playroom, need I say more? Bill Beasley said, Astro's Playroom managed to embrace the legacy of Sony's consoles while also creating a really fun platforming game which showcases the capabilities of the DualSense controller. I spent my first day of PS5 ownership playing it non-stop to get the Platinum Trophy and loved it. Richard Major says it was the year of new consoles and nothing showed off the best thing about the new generation. Of course, the DualSense better than Astro. And there we are. That's what the listeners had to say of Astro's Playroom.
Fantastic. Well, what's your number 3, Ben?
My number 3 is Demon Souls.
Oh, only number 3. Wow.
Yeah, that's right. Getting serious about this. Wow. It's a perfect remake. It is the perfect remake, honestly. I loved the original Demon Souls. It obviously, like for a lot of people, kickstarted my enjoyment of Soulsborne games in general. And when I first played it, I was terrible at it and didn't really understand it, and I shelved it. And it took one of my friends sort of dragging me through it in 2012-ish, 2011, for me to fully appreciate it. And then, I played it the month before the servers were switched off in the very beginning of 2018 and at the end of 2017. And I played it a few times in between there as well, playing it through co-op with friends and stuff. And to get a remake of this game, which is such an important game, and for it to be locked away on PS3 with the servers turned off is such a travesty when it's part of such a big franchise, or sort of the spiritual, predecessor to a huge franchise. It was so nice to have that game be confirmed after it was rumored for so long, and it's just so good. It's such a beautiful game anyway. Bluepoint have done an incredible job of, bringing it into 2020, and it still felt the same to play. There's loads of new animations and quality of life tweaks that, a remake should do. Lots of things changed, a couple of things introduced that I think were all welcome. There are, a couple of small issues with it here and there, but I think on the whole, they just absolutely knocked this out of the park. It was such a joy experiencing again. It was so nice being able to stream it and being able to play online without there being this huge, weird, archaic hassle of randomly putting down a summon sign and hoping your friends saw it before other people did. Yeah, it was great. Like, really, really good. I don't really know what more I can say without just repeating ground that I've said time and time again, or at least, in the quip scope that we did on it and stuff. But I was so impressed by this game. I played so much of it, platinumed it in 4 days. A few weeks later, ended up doing the mystery coin thing to go through the super secret door and get the set of armor that they put in there and stuff. And I don't think I'm ever going to uninstall it from my console, because I don't think I will ever be able to accurately predict when I will next return to it, because it could be at any moment. That any time a friend messages me saying, I'm stuck on this bit, I boot it up immediately, because I just love playing it, and I need an excuse to play it, because having played it through a few times, both on stream and also with my main character and for the platinum and stuff across a few different characters, it's time for me to sort of walk away from it again. But I think Bluepoint have proven, again, as we've discussed before, that they have the chops to either develop a full sequel to this game if they wanted to, or to finally do the very, 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 very long rumored DLC of the Archstone that was cut from the original game, which is still present in this game as an Archstone that's destroyed that you can't use. And I hope that they do it. I think, maybe out of creative respect for From Software, maybe they're a bit hesitant about touching it. But if they get the blessing of Miyazaki and co., then I really do hope that they give it a try. And if it goes well, then yes, I would like more Demon Souls, please. And it did get mentioned by a few people, but it didn't make it through to the second round. I'm assuming that's largely because A, it's a Soulsborne game, so it's not for everyone, and B, it's a PS5 exclusive, and there's a good chance that maybe a lot of people haven't got PS5s. So that's the problem there. But yeah, really just a brilliant game, and I'm so happy it exists, and it gives me renewed faith in seeing more Demon's Souls games potentially on PlayStation in the future.
Excellent. Wow. Well, it's time for number 2 now.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's your turn to drop the bomb.
The bomb that I sort of already spoiled earlier by saying that we're going to refer to someone later, but I didn't even think about it at the time. The listener number 2 is Ghost of Tsushima.
There it is.
The number 2 game of the year. It's pretty incredible stuff. Ian Rogers said, criminally underrated by critics, this game excels in visuals, gameplay, and story, and showed us what the PS4 could do at its peak. Daniel Neal says, the story is engaging and compelling on both a grand and personal level as your own task to save your uncle ties into the fate of the island.
Yeah. Friendly Lewis says, if not for the simple fact that NPCs follow you at the same speed and you don't have to dismount your horse to pick up... What? That's not a sentence.
If not for the simple fact that... Yeah, I think I copied and pasted half a sentence here.
So, let me try and
I'm
work
going
out
to
what the
choose Ghost of Tsushima, if not for the simple fact...
I see. If not for the simple fact that NPCs follow you at the same speed and you don't have to dismount your horse to pick up items. Convenience. Mm-hmm. There we go. Those are the reasons that Friendly Lewis chose it. And Connor Mountford, for me, it's Ghost of Tsushima. It's been a long time since I was dragged in by a game's story. Very good. So we've had your thoughts already on Ghost of Tsushima. I haven't played it. I've said before, I kind of struggle to... I kind of had this chip on my shoulder because when I was at school, loads of kids were really into kind of ninja stuff and samurais and martial arts, and at the same, there was a division in the school as to some kids were like into that, and then other kids were into other stuff.
Right. There was just the ninja fans group.
Yeah, there was like the ninjas and samurai, like kids in primary school playing that in the playground, and then like others would be playing, I don't know, ancient Egyptians or pirates or some other part of world history. I don't even know what we were playing, but accounting. Since then. I've not been like particularly kind of captured by that kind of realm of pop culture and fiction and stuff. It's not that I think I would like not enjoy it, but it's not the kind of thing that I go, I must go out and buy that right now and play it. So again, it's something that I know that if I gave it a go, eventually I would definitely have fun, and I definitely believe everyone when they say that it's an excellent game, but I can't add anything to the thoughts because I've not played it for that strange reason that goes back to my childhood.
Because you might get bullied by the accounting fans.
Yeah, all the pirates kids might make me walk the plank or something.
Oh man, that is a real risk.
Yeah. So I guess we're moving on to mine from there.
Yeah, your number 2.
So my number 2, it's time for a big game at long last. I wondered whether I should put this at number 1, but I couldn't not. Like my number 1 has to be number 1 ultimately. Okay. So my number 2 here is Crash Bandicoot 4. Ooh, it's about time.
It's about time.
It's about time. I really, really enjoyed this game. Now, of course, I'm a Crash fan. It's certainly not going to be for everyone. I understand that. In the same way that, you really enjoyed your Dark Souls and you understand that Soulsborne is, to an extent, it's a kind of niche genre, or it's not mass appeal. Crash Bandicoot 4, not only is it a Crash game in its style in terms of being a platformer, it's also very hard. It's like a lot harder, I think, than previous Crash games. But that's kind of the only thing that I didn't really enjoy about it was the difficulty. And that's not something I consistently disliked throughout the game. There were just moments where I'd be like, oh man, this was really difficult. But, outside of the difficulty, it's just everything I really wanted from a true Crash Bandicoot sequel since the. I mean, of course, we've had Crash Bandicoot sequels since the original trilogy, but those weren't as good, and they weren't what I wanted. Whereas here we have a game with like extra playable characters, which have been really well designed. It had a narrative unlike any other game in the, or certainly the original, unlike the original games. It actually had stakes in it, really, more than just, hey, collect the crystals, otherwise this comic book villain is going to take over the world. I thought the soundtrack actually was one of the best things about that game. It's up there with one of my favorite video game soundtracks of all time. I think, like, from the moment you boot the game up, like, the front menu theme is just it's my jam, as they say.
Yes,
it's my marmalade.
They do say that.
They do say it. And I would argue that it also features my favorite Crash Bandicoot level ever made, which is the sort of rhythm action Mardi Gras level in New Orleans. Mm-hmm. It's got great music to it. It's got really cleverly designed hazards and stuff, and it's just a visual spectacle. It really encompasses what the entire game is for me. I think it looks great, it sounds great, it plays great a lot of the time. Yes, there's the difficulty, but if anything, that just gives you more to play and more time spent on this game. And I don't think at any point I got bored or frustrated and felt like, I don't want to play this anymore, I'm going to turn it off because I'm stuck. I think there was fan service there, and they were trying to put something in there to challenge even long-time Crash players. They didn't want people to sit down and just blitz through this thing and be like, okay, that was fun, but man, I guess I'm just too good at these now.
Yeah.
So I think there was something for everyone, really. And I couldn't get enough of that. And again, it is a game I will be going back to play again and again and again, I think.
Mm-hmm. I watched Kadikarus's video essay on it about him collecting everything, because you collected everything as well, right?
No, I
not?
didn't. Okay. Absolutely not.
Because it seemed to nearly drive him insane.
Yeah, I think people who do that, I think he called that video, I completed the worst Crash game to complete.
Yes, yeah.
Because it is that. It's if you want to complete it, it's almost, in that respect, that's where the difficulty makes it not a bad game, but it's not a fun game. I think there will be some people out there who are huge Crash fans and Crash 4 fans who have 106%ed this game over and over. I've seen screenshots on Twitter where the 3 save slots that you can get are all labeled 106%, and people are like, just finish this game for the 3rd time. And I'm like, what on earth? What kind of machine are you? Like, how can you get any enjoyment out of that? But yeah, I think for the average player, it's probably it's not fun to try and max it out. But I didn't try and do that, and I'm not going to make myself do that. And I thoroughly enjoyed almost every moment of it because I chose not to.
That's good. That's a sensible approach. Callum Story had to say of Crash 4, despite being utterly painful at its worst, it shines as a wonderful sequel at its best. Just a shame they made it so bloomin' hard.
Yeah. I do wonder if the next one, if they do another one, will be a bit easier.
Yeah, you would hope, perhaps, right?
I wouldn't be surprised. I think that's the one takeaway that they've got to think about from this. Yeah.
And Ross Bramble said, completely biased with this one because I've waited 20 years for a new Crash entry that didn't make me weep.
Yeah, that's how I feel. And, they've done it.
They've actually done
it. Yeah. And just the throwbacks and stuff, because of the time travel aspect, they actually went back to some original Crash Bandicoot 1 kind of story points, and they had those VHS tapes I've told you about as well, where it's they were recorded at the time of Crash 1. Really clever stuff, but I could go on and on about it, and I won't do. It's time for your number 2.
My number 2, Peter, I think, if I'm judging this right, kick into conversation a sort of a back-to-back-to-back discussion about this game.
Right, yeah.
My number 2 is The Last of Us Part 2.
Ooh, your number 2. I'm trying to think what your number 1's going to be now, because I thought it would either be The Last of Us or
Demon Souls.
Demon Souls.
Oh, so don't worry.
There must be something I've forgotten.
It won't be a surprise. You've definitely forgotten.
Right.
Yeah, mine is The Last of Us Part 2. I will talk about why I put my number 1 at number 1 and this at number 2 when I get to my number 1. But obviously, it was a little more difficult to rank for me, my number 1 and number 2 slot. But I think I had to go with my heart in the end and put the game that meant the most to me at number 1.
Right.
But anyway, my number 2 is The Last of Us Part 2. The listener number 1 is The Last of Us Part 2. Peter, what's your number 1?
My number 1 is The Last of Us Part 2.
Oh my goodness!
So let's collectively, as a 3,
Yes.
including the audience, talk about our Last of Us Part 2's thoughts.
Absolutely. I've got a few notes here. So my number 2, The Last of Us Part 2. I think it's one of the most exhausting, beautiful, and brutal pieces of fiction I have ever experienced in any medium. And it's not perfect, but God, it's so special and so worth experiencing if you think you're up for it, because not only is it utterly harrowing from a God, human beings can be horrible perspective, but it's also, and I'm talking about the game currently, but it's also really scary as well. So it's you've got to balance the two was it knives or swords of Damocles dangling over you. Both are going to hit you, so you've got to decide if you're up for that. And it's definitely not going to be for everyone. But I think it's just such an important game. And I was so hooked. And I do think it went on a bit long. And I think it could have ended a lot sooner. And it had like 6 different times where I thought it was over and it kept going. Secretly, I was a bit thrilled, actually, that it kept going. Because I enjoyed that. But there was definitely... the halfway, let's just say the halfway point, I was sort of a bit perturbed by the fact that, again, without going into details, basically I had to start upgrading my weapons and skills from scratch again. Because I felt like, from sort of a flow and progression standpoint in that game, I felt like, oh God, really? It feels like I'm starting all over again now. And that... honestly took the wind out of my sails a little bit. I appreciate what they were doing, and ultimately I think it paid off in a big way. But at the time, I felt a bit deflated by that. And it was just like, it's not a unique... it's difficult to discuss this without mentioning specifics. It's not a unique angle to come at this sort of protagonist versus antagonist situation where you get to, let's say, view alternate perspectives. But to actively be thrust into it in the way that you were in this game and the way that they handled it, just one example being the dogs that have names. And let's say you pet a dog, and then in another scene as another character, you kill that dog without even thinking it's of any significance earlier on. Yeah. And you can hear people reacting and calling out its name in distress that the dog has been killed. And it's like, oh my God, this is awful. I feel awful. Naughty Dog are obviously an incredibly
I thought that was a full stop there. Naughty Dog,
full stop.
Dead dog.
Pause for breath. They're obviously an incredible studio, but they really have gone, I think they continue to push the bar, not only in terms of how to make the player feel bloody terrible about everything they're doing, but also the way that games can be interactive, as sort of methods of storytelling. There are so many things they do in that game that I have not seen done in other games, little things that honestly are mainly positioned to make you feel terrible about what you're doing, but it's also like, oh my God, that has real significance and I've never felt this way before in another game. It was really special. I will finish up by saying that it did obviously really bring to light the sort of blind toxicity that exists within gaming as a whole.
Yeah, when you say that human beings are terrible, now we're
talking about actual human, real human beings. It's okay to not like this game, right? For a multitude of reasons. But the sort of the harmful vitriol that was being spilled at the time was so unnecessary and such an overreaction that I'm really glad that now at the end of 2021 and leading into the end of 2020 and leading into 2021, we're at the point where rational voices can sort of appreciate the game for what it is without people yelling at you. Because I remember at the time when it came out, we had podcast questions, people saying things like, God, there seems to be a real split between fan reception and critical reception. It's like, that's really sad that that's what the message is that's getting out to the sort of general public, because that's not the case at all. And I think now, as I said, we're at the end of 2020. We can look back or we can look just around and see this game winning Game of the Year awards from everywhere. And I think it's, case proven that actually the people that were furious about this game either didn't play it or they were very much the minority. And as I said, it's okay to dislike a game. That's absolutely fine. But I think, as we've discussed ad nauseum, the reasons for people hating this game didn't line up with really grounded, critiques of what it was doing. But The Last of Us Part 2, a phenomenal experience. Not one I'm keen to revisit anytime soon, because it took a lot out of me. And I imagine I will play it through again at some point, but for now I'm happy to just sort of leave it be, because it was just devastating, that game. Every turn you took, it just took an opportunity to punch you in the face, and there's nothing quite like it.
You're right. That's certainly there's definitely nothing like it, really. If we quickly just officially say we're now on number ones, and hey, surprise, the patrons voted for The Last of Us Part 2 as number one, now we can start giving their quotes. So Jonesy said, quite simply, a beautiful game for many reasons. Love the narrative. It's up there with my all-time favourite games. And Will Howe said they managed to improve on the gameplay from the first in every aspect. Every single shot you fired or took felt visceral and immersive, and the story was chef kiss. Chef kiss. It's also my number one. Maybe we can pepper through some of those other thoughts.
Yes.
If I give some thoughts now.
Absolutely.
I completely agree with you with regards to, let's say, the turning point at the midpoint of the game. That moment happens at a very climactic point, so that the first half of the game reaches a climax, and then there's a sudden shift to something else entirely, and you're left on a cliffhanger. And at that point, I thought, oh man, this new perspective, like how long am I going to be doing this? I want to get back to that scene and see what happens, And I think that was the only problem with it for me. I didn't even necessarily... Well, I suppose I don't really like having to, like, sort of grind again and start unlocking abilities and, as you said, like, doing that all... Starting over in that respect. Like, that's not super fun. But the bigger issue for me was having been left on that cliffhanger and wanting to get back to that point to find out what happens, because that's the point of a cliffhanger. That's I'm sure that's what they were hoping for in a certain sense, but they probably weren't hoping, Naughty Dog I'm talking about here, for me to almost be rushing through from that midpoint to get back to that cliffhanger. Now, I'm not saying that I was like skipping stuff out that I wouldn't have done normally. I still explored every room I could find, and I still did all that I could and played the game in full. But I still, when it would like roll around to another mission, and then it seems like they're about to go and do the climax thing, and then it's like, oh wait, actually let's go like somewhere completely different and then go and do this thing first because we need to speak to this person. Then I would be like, it would almost make me feel like, oh please, I just want to see what happens. But on the other hand, I think that's something that who was it who just said it? Will Howe, I think, touches on something that actually doesn't always get mentioned when people are discussing The Last of Us Part 2, which is I think the gameplay was massively improved on from the first. I think it's so easy to start talking about the narrative or the controversy around the game's release, or the characters and so on, and the brutality of the whole thing, you can almost forget about the fact that it plays fantastically, that game. It's really super fun. I love the plastic bottle silencers on your guns. I did so much stealth in that game, so much sneaking through the grass. And you've got your shivs and things like that. And you're right, like just the very believable way that your enemies are presented with names and the way they call out to each other when, if you take someone out silently and their friend is like on patrol, and they'll go, "Hang on, has anyone seen Steve? Where's
oh no,
Steve's been gone for ages."
Steve.
Yeah. So it just felt believable, despite the fact that it's set in a world where there are mushroom zombies running around trying to bite you. There's something about it's just so gritty, and it takes it out of you. It's brutal. It was harrowing, and I felt racked by the end of it with just exhaustion and nervous energy, and it's bleak, but at the same time, it's exactly what I hoped for and more. I was worried that Naughty Dog wouldn't be able to, that lightning doesn't strike the same place twice, and that it would just never be what it, what the original game had been. But I really thought, in a different way, that it was, again, I'd like to think they set out to do, they managed to do what they set out to do. I think they ticked the boxes that they had in their mind. And those multiple endings, I thought there was a really interesting aspect to that where again, trying to be spoiler free, you reach a point in, it feels like an epilogue, but as it turns out, it's not, because something happens after that. But it looks like, some people are going to walk off into the sunset and live happily ever after in a very idyllic setting. And then there's a moment in that where suddenly it's like, oh no, by the way, all that horrible stuff that happened throughout your life, it's still really badly affecting you, and like you can't just live happily ever after. And I thought that scene, if you even understand what I'm talking about here, was incredible. I'll say in the barn. I don't think that's too spoilery. Absolutely. Something happens in a barn, and that I thought was an incredibly powerful scene, actually. And it makes sense. We've had video game protagonists go through stuff, and then they just get to the post-credit scene, and they're sitting on the sofa watching telly, and they're really happy.
That's
Drake probably not how it would go.
Wife, having a go at Crash Bandicoot, having murdered thousands of people.
Exactly. That's probably not how it would go in real life. And I thought every aspect of that game's story was brutal and harrowing and horrible, but in a believable and accurate way, and the way that it should have been done if they were trying to make a game that push some boundaries, I guess. And that's certainly what they managed to do, if nothing else.
They definitely did. I agree with what you said there. I think it's just such a powerful game, and it did. My thumbs were so sore after playing it, because honestly, and again at the turning point at the halfway, it just reached this stage where I was like, I am going into every single room, and instead of looking around and taking it in, I am running along the edge of every surface, mashing triangle to pick up crafting equipment because I don't want to miss anything. And it was my own fault, but it does sort of encourage you to do that, and I found it such an exhausting way to play the game. And again, as soon as we hit the halfway point and then you sort of start over, it's like, oh, for God's sake, now I've got to do it as this character as well. And it hurt my fingers, and I did that definitely added to a sense of sort of like, okay, I'm ready for this game to get on with it now. I think it could have quite easily been 20 hours instead of 30 hours, and I would have been perfectly happy with that. But as it stands, everything that's in there, I'm glad it's in there, because it all serves a purpose in the end.
Yeah, definitely. And I will just say, actually, with the sort of quote unquote multiple endings, as much as I was sort of confused and kind of thinking, is it over yet? It's a real Lord of the Rings experience. I was pleased. I every moment that game continued, I was glad. I had no issues with the length of that game. I could have just played it forever, as harrowing as it was and exhausting as it was. I didn't want it to end.
No, neither did I.
But I think the only kind of moment where I thought, oh, do I still want this, was at that turning point in the mid game where you kind of think, where's this going? But ultimately, once you get to the end of it, I think you no longer feel that way in retrospect. And I think if I played it again, knowing what was happening and what's to come, I would probably appreciate it even more. In fact, that midpoint of the game.
Yeah. I think that's something I'm looking forward to when I play through it again, is playing through it knowing that's coming, and being able to appreciate the things that happen leading up to it a bit more, a la the killing of dogs that are, they are trying to kill you, so that it is you do sort of have to defend yourself, but it does have extra weight with the added perspective coming back into it. But one thing that I really liked that actually they didn't do too much of later on was the sort of some of the earlier puzzle stuff, especially involving throwing around the cables, the power cables. Oh, yeah. I thought that was so clever how they did that with the, obviously they've just sort of adapted the physics in Uncharted 4 and Lost Legacy with the grappling hook and the ropes and stuff that you can throw. But I thought it was so good throwing it over fences and stuff. Yeah, through windows and things. It was really clever, and I was a big fan of that. I thought they're just scratching the surface on the kind of stuff they can do with the various mechanics that they've come up with in their engine, and I'm really looking forward to sort of those being expanded on in future games from them, whenever that will be.
God, yeah. What are they even going to do next? They might have to come up with a new IP at this point.
I think so. Apparently there's an Uncharted game in development at San Diego, but not at Naughty Dog, so who knows? Who even knows? But we do have some more thoughts from other patrons as well. Richard Major said, the story. Switching characters back and forth a few times really gave more meaning to the story, making me feel things I hadn't before. It looked beautiful, it did new things, it upset gaming alpha chads.
That's the real victory.
Yeah.
Dan Scott says, outstanding piece of art. A wonderfully woven narrative taking place within a beautiful, depressing landscape. A gripping 25-hour experience that plays with your emotions. Don't think it gets mentioned enough how much the gameplay and combat is improved over the first game. Well, there you go. I just said that. But also, the story is really good.
It is really, really good. To echo your thoughts about the gameplay, I played The Last of Us Part 1, or just The Last of Us, I suppose, remastered on PS4 leading up to the game's release, and that game is still phenomenal, but it's like some of its controls are a bit weird, and that is it's all so much better in Part 2. Like, they've really come a long way since then. Very long way.
Yeah.
And finally, Harrison says, when a game like that, to essentially someone who isn't a gamer, makes them feel as empty as I did inside, and made me instantly play the first game only to go through the trauma of the second one again in order to feel its power, then I believe it can be hailed as one of the best games.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, looking at... I've still not worked out what your number one's going to be, and maybe I'm going to kick myself.
You are.
But, right, okay. But looking at the... at what we've done in terms of patron votes, plus my votes, plus your votes, without doing any maths and assigning values to actual rankings, looks to me like this might be sort of collectively our game of the year, Last of Us Part 2, would you say?
I would say it absolutely is, especially as far as the patrons go. It came out way ahead in the first round and came out way ahead in the second round of voting as well. So it was the clear winner as far as the patrons are concerned.
And it's my number one and your number two. Yeah. So yeah, surely between us.
I would say it's
there you go.
It's the collective game of the year. Absolutely
collective. Yeah.
Nah.
Well, it's time for me to remember a game that I've forgotten has existed. Clearly.
Now time for me to be just sort of a precious diva and split from the herd and say, hey, here's my number one. It's not the same as your number one. But as I said, this was, let's just say, like Borderlands 3 last year, which was my game of the year. I've played better games this year, but this one definitely had the biggest impact on me. And so for me personally, I had to put it at number one, and I did and ah about this, and it's Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Oh, of course. Well, so I'd not forgotten that. I thought you'd already said that. I
No.
think so. That'd be why. Yeah.
Yep, Final Fantasy VII Remake is my game of the year. I have thought about it a lot since I played it when it came out. I want to say in April. It's a long time ago now. But yeah, it's stuck with me ever since. And even though I ended up grinding and getting the platinum and going a bit insane playing it on the hardest difficulty, it was still such a joy. And it's a game that I really, really it's popped up a few times this year, sort of in the same headspace as Spider-Man did last year. Sorry, we're not in 2020 anymore, thank God. But yeah, it popped up a few times throughout the year. Like, I really want to play that again. I would think about the music and think, God, that game was really good. I'd like to play that again. I want to play that again. And I didn't, because I didn't have time. But I'm assuming that when it eventually releases on Xbox and other platforms and stuff, it will have some sort of next-gen upgrade. So I might wait for that. Not that the game, looked rough, because it was beautiful. Yeah. Apart from some of the textures. But yeah, really good. So, it was my favourite game of all time being remade. And A, it actually came out after 5 odd years. And B, it was really, really good, which I don't think a lot of us were expecting. And certainly in my initial impressions, I wasn't that hyped up on it. After the opening, the bombing run, the bombing mission that I played at EGX, and they released in the demo as well, I was like, this is brilliant. The music's incredible. I loved their take on combat and the additional dialogue and stuff. Hearing it voiced was such an elevated experience for me as someone who was a fan of the original. And then you go to the first sort of hub town and you do a quest where you go looking for a little girl's lost cat. And at that point, I was like, "Oh no! What have they done? I am. This has lost me completely." But I stuck with it, and in the end, sort of like when you play any new game for the first time and a mechanic pops up, and it's like, "Okay, I hate the fact that I'm having to learn something here." But ultimately, it becomes second nature. You go to the next hub town. It's like, right, I've got to do all the side quests so I get all the bonus points and so on, and get all the goodies that comes with those. So it just sort of became second nature. And I don't think any side quest dipped as low as finding the lost cat. But everything from the music to the expanded character arcs and the way it begins to distance itself from the plot of the original is hugely exciting. The fact that it is, and I sort of spoke about this at the time, the game almost becomes self-aware, like not in a poking fun at itself kind of way, but in a Terminator AI kind of way. Like, it knows, it's implied that certain antagonists know what happened originally, and they're trying to change it, and that's hugely exciting for what they can do with the rest of it, because not only is it sort of nodding and winking and saying, "Ooh, something's up here. What is it? Who even knows?" But they gave us the fan service of the first part remade, and they did a brilliant job. And they gave us expanded looks at various characters, all the members of Avalanche and stuff. You spend way more time with them, and they become really compelling, and you actually care about them. And it just makes it that much more heartbreaking when what happens to them happens to them. But then what happens to some of them maybe doesn't happen to some of them, and you're like, hang on, why is this not? What is going on? This didn't happen before. That shouldn't be like that. And as it goes on, it becomes more and more implied that actually someone is actively trying to change what happened in the original game. And so now that the developers have given us the fan service of this first part, they've sort of given themselves they've sort of laid the groundworks to kind of diverge from the path and do their own thing while still set in the vague world that Final Fantasy VII took place in. And that's really exciting. I don't know if they will, be able to live up to that expectation and the sort of the standard that they've set for themselves. I don't know when we'll even see a next part. If we'll see a next part. They're apparently working on it, but it does, I think, need to continue in the vein of how they designed this one. It needs to be in 3 parts, and each one needs to be given as much time and care and attention and be expanded as much as this one did, because I was blown away by this, and I cannot wait to play the next part and eventually go back to this one as well.
Yeah, no, that's no surprise that issue number 1. We mentioned it was patrons number 4, and 3 games later, or 3 entries later, with multiple games in each one, I'd forgotten that you'd not already talked about, that you'd not already talked about it. Yeah. So I'm not surprised at all that that's your top pick. And I feel the same way about, that's why Crash 2 ranks as high as number 2 for me, is that I know that it's not the second best game of the year, even within the games that I've played, but sometimes it's our personal best games of the year, or our favorite games of the year perhaps. Rightly so. Like, your number 1 spot, or your top 3 or top 5 should be what we want, what we enjoyed the most. So there we go. That's wonderful. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed that so much.
I did.
And as I say, I will give it a try one day.
You should. It's fantastic. Very, very good. But there we are. That is our games of the year for 2020. And thank you to our patrons, of course, as well, for helping and getting involved with their selections. And Peter is going to tell you now where else you can find us and how you can get involved with similar things in the future.
Absolutely. We're on youtube.com and twitch.tv/Team TripleJump, where we do all of our videos and streams. When we're streaming, we're modded by Lobrotovich, Madsterdactyl, and Trowling Badger. Thank you very much. Our social media is twitter.com and facebook.com/Team TripleJump. Luke Eldon looks after Facebook. Thank you, Luke. And you can head over there and tell us about other games that maybe should have been in this list, but hey, why weren't you on Patreon voting for your selection, which you could have done by going to patreon.com/Team TripleJump. Lots of different rewards available there, including Worst Games Ever a couple of days early. We've got a Discord, bit.ly/Team TripleJump. That's modded by Jack and Joe. Thank you, Jack and Joe, for modding the Discord. The podcast, if you're watching on YouTube, is available in audio form at play.acast.com/s/TripleJump. And the website is triplej.mup. If you go to triplej.mup, that's ju.mp/shop, there will be merch available there for you to buy. At time of release, I don't know if the new merch will be there yet, but we've got new merch on the way this year, early this year, very soon, hopefully. So that's very exciting. And finally, triplej.mup/VODs will redirect you to our YouTube channel, where we upload all of our VODs. And Pat looks after that with our weekly highlights videos and does an excellent job. And James also looks after it by uploading the VODs themselves. So thank you, Pat and James, for looking after the VODs there.
Absolutely. You can follow Peter on Instagram and Twitter at @PeterAustin, and myself just on Twitter at @confused_dude. We do lists every Tuesday and Thursday, streams every Monday, Thursday and Friday. Thursday being the joint stream, Blaze It on YouTube. Monday and Friday being solo streams on Twitch. Worst Games Ever is fortnightly. Friday for patrons of a certain tier, Sunday for everyone else. The podcast is every Saturday, and we do shows once every other week or thereabouts. Finally, please leave us a review on iTunes. It would help very much with something to do with Al Gore's rhythms. We would like to thank Andrew from Cultaholic for all his hard work doing bonus streams for us on a Sunday.
Absolutely.
He has returned to the land of wrestles for now, but we do hope to see him in the future. And thank you to everyone who was so welcoming and lovely to him when he was streaming on Twitch for us.
Indeed, he did an excellent job. Kept the Twitch channel going while we were on our little breaks. So thank you very much, Andrew. And he will be back, I'm sure, at some point. Yeah.
It's a Worst Games Ever week, Peter.
Yes, it is. That's back too. We're straight back into Worst Games. First week of the year, and it's a Worst Games week.
It is. It's the first time we spoke to each other as well. Since coming out, it's like,
had to play a terrible game.
Time to play a horrible video game.
And I think we were both a bit sleepy as well, because we've been getting up at silly late in the morning, and then we had to get up and do that. But it's okay.
It's a good one. You'll enjoy it. Go give that a watch. That would have come out yesterday at the time of release for patrons, and Sunday for everyone else. So Go give that a watch. Also, we released a massive ranked list. Every handheld games console ranked from worst to less. Works to best, works to worse. And that is sort of a sequel to the console ranked that we did last New Year's Day.
Yeah, well done, Alex, for editing that together. It was a hefty job, and Philip for writing it as usual.
Well done, guys.
Brilliant stuff.
And finally, there was another every launch game played video about the PS1, and that's all up live now for you to go and watch if you haven't seen it already. I think it's time for lunch, actually. We somehow skipped over breakfast and lunch during the course of this recording, so I think it's time to go have our meal.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that today's sponsor, I'd like to remind you, was Snug Backs to keep your back snug. But because we've not had breakfast and lunch, I'm worried that I would accidentally say Bug Snacks because I require a snack. So, no, well, it's a good job it's not real then, isn't it?
That's handy. Terrible. Right, well, thanks so much, everybody, for listening, and we will see you for a regular episode next week. Bye!
Bye-bye!